today's podcast, we're talking to Fred. Fred Gough is an amazing individual, a local community person, stood for the Green Party. We sat out in our garden and had a good hour and a half chatting over everything from his political ambitions, how he struggled at university, and some of the cave that he felt he went into. You will hear aeroplanes, you will hear cars driving past, you will hear dogs barking and drills in the background. It's a community podcast and it's there about my local people. And Fred is such a great local person. Bundles of energy. His persona might not always show an energetic side, but his passion and desire to do things in the community is second to none. So for today's podcast, please, I hope you enjoy it. Welcome Fred Gough. So Fred, thanks for coming to see me today.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you do the podcast.
Yeah, I'm very honoured to be here.
No problem. So first thing I want to talk about is when you were younger at school, what was Fred's plan? What did you have in your mind to say, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I want to go and do?
So obviously when I started at primary school, you know, everyone's minds are completely different to what they're going to be when they're adults, but you know, my first in life was supposed to be involved in the railways and that sort of thing. I was very into Thomas the Tank Engine and things like that, and that really sort of motivated me a lot. So, and I was fortunate to be in a primary school that was not far from Darvydale railway station, so whenever they had galas on it for Peak Rail and things like that, I would always happily try and make myself available to go to those and that sort of thing, even though I was commuting from Belper and that sort of thing. I used to love going down to see the steam engines and things like that, and you know, I was a big sort of collector of Thomas the Tank Engine memorabilia and all those sort of things, because I watched the television shows Relentless. I enjoyed my parents reading stories to me at bedtime and that sort of thing, so that was my first initial sort of love and interest. And then as I sort of got into the sort of age of almost towards secondary school, I started to get into sports and things like that, so you know, doing things with football was quite high on my agenda. I didn't really want to play. I wanted to do something within the sport, but I wasn't completely sure what that would involve really. I sort of thought about doing something like sports journalism and that sort of thing, so looking at writing or maybe even working on the radio or something like that. I remember going to a Derby County match when I was about 10 years old. We played Athletic Bilbao in a friendly. My dad got tickets for us that were probably between the Players' Tunnel and the media centre of Pride Park Stadium. Me and my friend were obviously there with him that day. My friend raced to the Players' Tunnel and I turned my back and sort of said, right, I'm going to go and try and get the media autographs. So I spoke to the sort of media producer at the time of BBC Radio Derby, who's now part of the Derby County family, Colin Gibson.
Oh wow, yeah.
And got his autograph on the front of that day's programme, which is a bit of a rare thing, but I just, you know, I preferred that rather than getting someone like Malcolm Christie or George King Clancy's into an autograph. And that sort of fulfilled me probably till I was about 15, you know, that sort of love and passion. You know, I always liked listening to the radio, even though we'd moved out to Lincolnshire by that point for a brief spell of life. I still kept close to Derby County as a football club. We didn't have the season tickets as readily, but we still went to the odd games, me and my dad. But we enjoyed keeping up to date with it, and obviously in those days, you know, it wasn't as readily available because the social media wasn't really present, but you know, being able to go on the website, see what was happening in the local sports team was something important to us. After my GCSEs, that sort of fell away because I wasn't really confident enough to sort of think I could do it, and I didn't really have a full action plan of where I wanted to go when I started work when I was 18. So I just basically sort of thought, well, I'll go into a job that needs admin really work. You know, I was quite happy just to sort of tick boxes and help filing and that sort of thing, because it was honest work, you know, and obviously it was just prior to the economic crash, so I was hoping that I'd be able to get up the sort of ladder a bit and find my way, really. But when I initially went into work, I was offered an accounts apprenticeship by the chartered accountants I was working for. Senior partner who interviewed me said that I'd be tearing my hair out within 6 months, just doing admin work. And to be fair to him, I probably would have been. You could see that I was data analytical, you could see that I was motivated rather than just docile and sort of wanting just to be given tasks. I was quite ingenious with my own productivity and that sort of thing, and I think he recognised all those qualities that you sort of need to be an accountant rather than the stereotypical outlook of an accountant.
Sure.
So I did a year of accountancy. It didn't really bode with me as much as I thought it could have done. You know, as much as I enjoy working with spreadsheets and that sort of thing, I just thought, well, I didn't really want to be ticking those boxes as much. But thankfully, that employer gave me the opportunity to say, well, we're a small firm, but we need a bit more help with the IT side of the things. Because could see that I was still analytical, I was focused on that side of things. And as long as I found something that sort of gave me confidence in that field, that was quite productive. So, you know, they agreed, similar to the way apprenticeships work now, would give me a day release. They gave me an opportunity to do a day release at a course that I could find that fitted the quota, and I took a bit of a salary sacrifice. But, you know, I'd hoped that it would flourish into something. During that time I got more acquainted with things like web design, and social media was starting to really be a burning sort of triumph of what it is now, really. You know, I think there's a lot of people underestimate how it fledged really in those days, and you know, I'd been part of Facebook since almost its inception, really. Same with Twitter, even though I didn't really properly use Twitter for another few years because it's a bit of a harder learning curve, and same with Instagram. It's only taken me a few years to get around my head around about that as well.
Sure.
But I loved that sort of motivation of being a medium where you can talk to people and get to know people through it and that sort of thing, and actually be able to sort of be a forum, really, rather than being I'm better than you and almost tribal manner. Yes, okay, there are a lot of people who use it for that sort of thing, but for me, you know, it's a nice opportunity to engage and build community and that sort of thing, and that's been constant without my, you know, my presence on social media. I mean, I've got involved with different things with social media, so I got involved in local politics and that sort of thing, and those skills were recognised quite highly. You know, I put my hand up first for that sort of role. I've always been keen to motivate myself to push myself a bit harder and go that sort of extra mile for things like that. But truth be told, you know, it was just a sort of thing I could just do on the back burner and not have to think heavily about it. Even now I'm still doing quite a lot of social media work and here and there for local politics and even national politics at the moment as well, with which inspires me.
Sure. So, I mean, that's a great breadth and depth of life, and some of the things that you sort of described there are amazing. So people listening and people watching this podcast probably won't realise that, you know, you're diagnosed with autism and dyspraxia. Is that right? Dyscalculia as well, or was that lesser?
It's just dyspraxia.
Just dyspraxia. So from all of the stuff that you've just relayed there, that's, you know, that's a massive amount of achievement that you've done, and obviously sort of part of our discussions previously that you've managed to get through university. You started on one course, you didn't complete that course because you realised at a point that it was the wrong sort of course for you, and switched courses with some great, you know, desire to still stay within education, and have worked your way through. So coming back to the sort of the autism and the dyspraxia, where did that challenge sort of first start to show itself?
I suppose it was sort of highlighted quite early on by my parents. I mean, as I say, it was a late diagnosis. I'm now 32, going to turn 33 in the early part of 2022. So I was diagnosed when I was 28.
Right.
But I suppose the warning bells were a little bit present when I was in primary school. I wasn't that much of a social animal. I mean, it was a independent private school where class sizes were small that I was sent to. I mean, initially I was sent to St John's, just near Farlawn and that sort of area, but after a term my parents realised that was probably an environment that I would have not really amounted much.
Wouldn't have thrived in the way that they wanted you to.
No. So we went to an event which obviously was advertising different schools in the local area, and we fell upon this school in Darley-Dale, Snagliffe Hall School, which unfortunately closed in 2001.
Right.
When I was still a student there. I was 1 year from the finale year, which was a bitter pill to swallow really.
Sure.
At the time for all of us, because we felt it was the place I was safe, I was in a good environment. The pastoral support I got from teachers was quite top notch really for what I could do really, but there was no paperwork to say Fred's autistic, Fred's dyspraxic, but staff recognised Fred can't deal with certain issues. He's a bit slower reader, or he stumbles over words at times that might be a bit awkward for other people. He might find certain sports quite difficult to play, even though I will always throw myself in at every opportunity, and I can do some things that surprise people. I mean, despite I'm dyspraxic, I can spin bowl in cricket.
Oh wow.
I can't bowl straight and fast, but I can spin bowl, which is one of those weird quirks.
Yeah, sure.
You'd think that'd be harder, but I still enjoy watching cricket to this day. I've been to watch Derbyshire play a few times, and I still enjoy that participation in sport life. Same with football. I never really took to playing, but I've always enjoyed that process of it. Thinking the outside the box side of things. And then when we moved to Lincolnshire for secondary school, again that was an independent school. There was no full paperwork behind me, but again the pastoral support that I was gaining allowed for extra time on examinations such as GCSEs and my A levels and things like that. They allowed me to use a laptop rather than having to write things down in certain exams, because my speed of writing at that time was very slow, and train of thought was better when I was typing and that sort of thing. So I was fortunate in regards to that, and I thought when I was back in work in between the years of 18 and 27 that I was quite mobile, I was quite active in life. I was positive about things. I wasn't really thinking too much about autism and dyspraxia as much. It didn't come into my roles as much. People sort of knew I had traits, because of the ways that I would perhaps get on with certain actions, and they wouldn't sort of make me try and do anything that was out of my capability. I mean, I was never going to be the manager of the IT department, because the guy that had been there for many years, but I didn't sort of seem that I wanted to usurp him. I just wanted to work under him and develop it that way. Then when I did go to the university, everything seemed okay academically. I was getting reasonable grades, I was happy with the start I was making, I was enjoying being in that community, and as student rep I was really proud of everything I was putting forward, again, not shying away from anything, which most autistic people tend to do. I think a lot of people who are autistic don't want that burden, that pressure, that expectation of themselves, and then because it was a vocational course, that sort of vocational nature of it really brought those things to light, unfortunately, as much as I didn't really want them to. I don't think the people that I was on the placement with saw the best out of me, unfortunately, because they couldn't really recognise, I needed that little bit of a helping hand, and that created more anxiety, it created more low mood, and that sort of thing, which no one wants to go through. But I, tried to battle myself through it, and I recognise that the university obviously has policies of saying, well, unless you've got the paperwork behind you, then they can't really make exceptions to the rules and that sort of thing. So, it was an unfortunate situation, but I tried to get back on the horse as quick as I could. Tried another placement situation, only a handful of weeks after the first attempt. Maybe it might have been better to have waited in hindsight, but I was more determined to try and catch up to speed with the rest of the cohort that I was really friendly with. And it did tear me apart when that broke down. I think anyone who spoke to me, which was not many people, because I did go into a bit of a sort of cave and not really wanting to come back out again for a bit, knows that I really gave it a shot, really cared about what I was doing, and my determination was still to get a degree at the end of it. I mean, thankfully, as we sit together today, I've now managed to get a degree. Really pleased that I've got that degree behind me. I didn't throw myself in as far as I did with that course initially, but I, kept a steady pace. I kept up to date with things. I made sure that everything was worked for me, really, and I got deliverance of that. I mean, thankful that the Wellbeing Centre at the University of Derby obviously gave me that time to get this diagnosis, rather than having to go through the onslaught of having to wait many years for a diagnosis and that sort of thing. I mean, that for me is still shocking that many people are still in wait, however old they are, to get diagnosis that could make or break them, really.
So, I mean, you've mentioned support. You've mentioned obviously going your metaphorical cave, as you sort of call it. What sort of things have you done? How have you managed to sort of bring yourself to, right, I need to come out of this, I need to move forward? I guess the other thing is, how did you feel at that time when you said you were quite low, quite dark, and what was the sort of scenarios? What did you do to get yourself moving forward?
I think one of my main things was to make sure I got regular time outside and regularly walking and that sort of thing, embracing nature and that sort of thing. I think that's, having plenty of vitamin D in the diet of life, makes a big difference. I think, we were renting a property in Denby at the time, so walking up to Horsley Woodhouse and back from that property, was enough for a stable walk per day.
Sure. And,
I could treat myself at the end of that walk by picking up a sandwich or something like that from the co-op shop and sort of saying, yeah, okay, I've got to the top of the hill, almost, and just keep pressing with that. I think also I was grateful for having friendships that, stuck by me regardless of how I felt and that sort of thing. I've developed friendships mostly in my earlier years through online platforms such as social media and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And having those sort of contacts that probably weren't present physically and tangibly meant that I could actually sort of talk to them without them interfering with my life as much.
So is that at primary school, I guess, sort of not having that knowledge at primary school, but the teachers possibly being in that sort of, we think there might be something unique and special that Fred is bringing to the table. How did that affect you at sort of your early sort of education? How did you manage to sort of push your way through during your early formative years of schooling?
At that time, I suppose I just didn't really notice it, really. I suppose I just was happy with that independence of my own thought, really. And looking back in hindsight, probably I wish I could have been a little bit more vocal and a bit more friendly with people. I mean, it was a small class size. I mean, by the time that primary school closed in 2001, the class size was only 10 of us, and it was a little bit sort of, I was having to sort of make friends with people in different year groups and that sort of thing. But, those friendships I didn't really sort of see as lifelong, really. Almost, they were more there for the moment, and I sort of, if I wanted to talk to someone, I'd probably talk to an adult more than I would talk to a child of my age. Whether that's appropriate, I don't know. It's
sure.
But I felt more comfortable by the maturity of a teacher or someone like that to talk to about football or whatever it may be, and that had gone through my head. And thankfully, that pastoral support was there, that they didn't sort of say, "Oh, buzz off," I've got to monitor that kids aren't hurling themselves down the slides or whatever it may be. It's I took it for granted that was there. As time wore on, I suppose I did feel a little bit lonely, but not to a degree where I was sort of really wanting that connection with people. I just sort of decided that it's an opportunity to make the most of, saying this is me. If people want to befriend me, then they befriend me. And thankfully, one or two people from that period are still with me today.
Sure.
Okay, I don't get to see them that regularly because I say they're up and down the country. I've got a good friend in London, good friend in Cornwall, a good friend in Leeds. Those people, I don't readily see, and especially with the pandemic, I've not seen them for at least 2-3 years, obviously. But we keep in touch through text messages and things like that, and that keeps me going, really.
And what do you think? What's the pandemic? I mean, it's been a crazy, like say, 20 months, as we were talking earlier. What's the pandemic taught you? What can you drag from something that's obviously taken a lot of people so low? What would you say you'd be able to pull out as something that's made Fred stronger or bigger or better or bolder? Or
I think knowing that there is not everyone's alone in this. I think that's really given me courage, knowing that we're all unsure of how it's going to work out. That's something that worries a lot of people when they first initially think about these things, is how can they deal with it, because we're all waiting for the next sort of statement from Boris Johnson or something like that. That uncertainty obviously frightens me, the anxiety of not knowing whether it's safe to do this, or where I feel comfortable doing the same things I used to do and that sort of thing. But knowing that everyone felt that way gave me a little bit of solace, a bit more warmth, knowing, okay, I can use my initiative and say, okay, let's focus on my studies, which obviously were hampered by the pandemic. I wasn't going to lectures on campus as readily, or obviously towards the end, not at all. It was all...
And how was that? I mean, obviously somebody who's not been in this sort of student life, I've got family who are. How was sort of lockdown in terms of learning for you?
It was a challenge, because it's having to deal with walking on eggshells with family members in the same household, whereas going to the university gave me that opportunity to sort of spread my wings and sort of mingle with different people a lot more, whereas when you're trying to do it through a Zoom call or through Blackboard Collaborate and things like that, then you're not likely to have that same engagement with the same people as much. We did our best, and obviously it made some things a bit tougher than they probably could have been. One of the final modules I studied had 2 assignments that were group based, so having to try and organise and communicate through that was difficult for us all. Especially for me, who wanted that independent thought and that sort of thing, and when I've done academic work, I've been very insular, very focused on my own stuff, whereas having to contribute to the team, I was very hesitant at first, and I had to sort of talk it through with the lecturers to say, I don't feel comfortable with this, but can we just try and sort of find a way of sort of putting 2 and 2 together to make sure that everyone's on the same wavelength and that sort of thing. Thankfully, that pastoral support was there. The university did everything it could to make sure that there was no deterrent for students to fail, really. At the end of the day, it's made sure that students have got through this best they can.
And pastoral support's been something you've sort of mentioned a couple of times. That's been really key for you in your time.
Definitely. I mean, I think I look up to academics, members of the community and that sort of thing, and I think they do a great job, really. I mean, it's underestimated how much they've had to go through with this as well. I feel sorry for those that have had to sort of try and teach younger kids, how to get on with life through the pandemic. I don't know how they've managed to do that. I honestly don't know, because working in a sort of establishment like a school is very difficult at the best of times, but trying to do it through a Zoom call must be incredibly hard. So I've been very grateful that I've had lecturers, tutors, teachers, staff around establishments that I've been at that have really engaged with me, given me time, given me patience, given me time to be valued, and that sort of thing.
And what makes Fred happy? How do you get to your happy place?
I think keeping an eclectic mix of life, really.
Yeah.
I think, if I tried to sort of stay stationary and think, okay, I'm going to only focus on one thing, I would be probably quite frustrated and ill-adjusted in life, whereas because I've got different tangents of life that I get involved in, and, I enjoy, and hobbies that I can pursue, and interests and things that make me laugh and make me cry and make me enjoy the full flavour of life, then I'm happy for that. And I think knowing that I can turn to one of those things if something else isn't working for me, rather than getting stuck almost. I think, if I could, obviously some things I've not been able to do properly as much as I would want to in the last few years because of the pandemic, because of having to be financial sort of scrupulous because of finances with going to university and that sort of thing. Had to be frugal about what I want to spend money on and that sort of thing. But I've tried to sort of think, okay, well, how can I make use of this time rather than wasting it? And I'm always giving myself a bit of a goal to achieve, and I think that helps me motivate myself to keep going. So it might be, okay, well, put a bit of money aside, I can afford to buy myself a new video game or something like that, or it might be a new book, or it might be, okay, I'm going to go and do this event or something like that. I mean, say politics is a big part of my life. In 5 weeks' time is political conference for the first time in 2 years, face to face. That's my goal at the moment, is to get to that point, so that I can mingle with friends that I made at the conferences I went to 2 years ago again, and get to see their smiling faces again.
So everything you've achieved, regardless of your diagnosis, you've managed to come at head on.
Yeah.
You've gone straight in, so through your education that you didn't know, early years, into university, having a job, also your political ambitions. This is amazing for somebody who, with autism, with dyspraxia. I'm sure people out in the streets wouldn't even realise, sort of talking to you or looking at you, that wow, here's a man who's had these struggles. Politically then, what is it you want to achieve politically? I know we sort of said, we don't want to talk necessarily about, it's not a political podcast, but what would be Fred's ambition from a political perspective?
I think one of the things that drew me to politics was campaigning highly for social justice. I think there's so much sort of negativity when it comes to talking about mental health, and certainly neurological conditions such as autism and dyspraxia, where people just sort of don't really appreciate how it affects so many of us, really, unfortunately. And many people just underestimate that how many people are dealing with these dark thoughts, dealing with the difficulties. And I want to campaign for better prevention, preventive services, better facilities for people to go to when they're feeling low. I mean, I've been fortunate, obviously, to get support through the university, but there's so many people who are still waiting for diagnoses, still waiting for understanding where to go for sport, and we've obviously, because of COVID and things like that, we've lost many people's opportunities to go into hospital and things like that, because mental health has been quashed under the carpet as much as everyone's sort of focused on the physical ailments of COVID in the political landscape. I mean, I was on a Zoom call last night which was talking about these figures, and it is shocking to look at when you put all these figures together, and the fact that not many people get that opportunity to say, okay, you've saved my life by explaining to me that's who I am. And I think that safety net has given me encouragement, and I want to give that power to other people, really, as much as I can politically. I want to say to them, look, it doesn't matter what background you are, whether you're an English white man or a black woman or whatever like that, or an Afghanistan refugee at the current climate of politics, and you are still welcome in this country to get as much support as you need. I think that for me is something that I want to empower.
So we talked earlier about going out for a walk, we talked about the physical attributes of wellness. Is there something else that you would say to anybody, this is something I think you need to reach out and do as a person, from a personal perspective?
I think everyone is different in their own regard, and it's finding that happiness and that sort of thing, and not everyone can have the luxury of being able to walk and get out and about and that sort of thing. I mean, say we're lucky to be in the Derbyshire environment rather than being in a built-up urban setting like Glasgow or London or Edinburgh or something like that, which, finding that green space is very limited. But I think there are plenty of things that an individual could possibly consider. I mean, other things that I've done obviously are that I enjoy blogging and things like that as well. I enjoy sort of putting my thoughts out on the web, as much as some people might sort of say, well, I don't agree with that, or actually, but it's my little corner of the internet, and I feel proud to have published something like that.
And how do you deal with anybody coming to you? 'Cause emotionally, I'm sure does your autism give you a heightened sense of sort of not discomfort, but a little bit of concern if somebody challenges?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
and how do you deal with that?
It does send me into a bit of a downward spiral after probably a little bit of time, which is only natural with it being a heightened sense of this sensitivity to it. But I try and sort of think, well, if I could try and perhaps educate them and perhaps sort of point them in the right direction of saying this is where I've got my argument from, or if I'm struggling and it feels that it's not my place to do that, then obviously I will go to higher responsibilities. I mean, recently, I've been helping a campaign within my politics environment which was a bit toxic by some people's standards, and I went to higher board and they told me the actions that they feel was best to cope with it, and that helped console my negative sort of sensitivity almost to it. Do I like that people want to abuse other people on social media and things like that? And no, I don't, but I'll never condone people to do so. I think at the end of the day, people unfortunately act as keyboard warriors at the best of times, unfortunately, and if they see something that is not for them to understand, then they will be aggressive towards it. But it's being mindful in yourself. Okay, kind of switch off from it for a bit, take myself away from that sort of protocol, try and find myself in a bit of solace somewhere else. Thankfully, I've got my parents still around me, I still live with them, and if they notice I'm a little bit more succumb with life, then they'll say, well, do you fancy going for a walk, or do you fancy going for a drive somewhere, and we can just distract you by talking about something completely different. They might not actually understand what I'm down about, but and I'm, sometimes I just keep it to myself, but they will always find a way of saying, yeah, okay, he's down, he needs a bit of a pepper up.
And how long does that sort of sit with you? I mean, I guess it's different every time, but do you sort of like, I don't know, I have days. Yesterday I had a flat day, just flat. Don't know why, have no idea. But today everything's fine. So sort of, do you have comparable times where you sort of know, oh, it's only 2 days, or it's only half a day, or 5 minutes?
It can vary. I mean, I think during, say, winter periods, I mean, it's not SAD syndrome or anything like that that's within me, even though I have sort of considered that that low light and wintry aspects might have a bit of effect on my biology and that sort of thing. But obviously that's when it's probably at its hardest to strain from it all and sort of say, okay, I might need probably 3 or 4 days where it's flat and low, whereas during the summer months it might just be a day or 2 days. Sometimes I just need to work it out myself. Sometimes I need help from other people. It can be quite variable. Thankfully, I've got a community of friends and family members who will respond to me, and not sort of push me aside and say, oh, just put a grin on things. I'm thankful that they'll sort of say, do you want to talk something about whatever's going on, or can we help? All those sort of things.
And do you recognise it, or do other people? Is it something that other people recognise, or are you able to sort of go, yeah, actually, do you know what? Today, I need to do something.
Most of the time, I can recognise it within myself. I mean, okay, it comes on out of the blue, so I will not sort of say, okay, I can't be bothered with today. I'm just going to roll back the duvet and sleep it off. I'm not that sort of person. I wouldn't, even on a flat day, I will still get myself up. When I was really detached during the period of changing courses at the university, that's when I was a bit like that, I'll admit that. But since then I've been a little bit more, okay, now I need to sort of get myself up and ready for the day, even if I'm just not really doing much. At least I've got myself dressed. I can count that as a positive for the day. I've got myself
a win.
Yeah. So I think all those little things I can take for measure, and it's knowing that I've eaten something, knowing that I've had plenty to drink, had plenty to sort of keep myself peppering on. It might not be much, but at least it's getting there. And if it is getting a bit too much, then obviously I do raise the hand, and people sort of take notice and sort of say, okay, can we help? I'm not someone who will scream into social media and say I'm feeling suicidal or anything like that, because I don't want to put negativity on social media. I've only probably done that once or twice in my life, and I felt guilty for doing so in some ways. But if I can do it in a private way, where I'm saying to someone, look, I'm going through quite an intrusive thought at the moment, can we just have a conversation or something like that, it makes all the difference.
Without diving into any depth, sort of any intrusive thoughts or any dark thoughts, do you think that's something that's just Fred? Do you think that's something that your diagnosis has brought forward, or is this something that sort of you've had to carry through most of your life?
I think I've noticed it a lot more since being diagnosed. I probably tried to dissuade it a lot when I wasn't diagnosed. When I was probably in a structured routine of work and things like that, then it was probably not as noticeable in my day-to-day life, because I used to just have a routine where I was just going to work, coming back home, basically putting myself in front of the television and then going back to bed, really. Almost that was almost my routine for the day. When structure of routine went out the window going into university and that sort of thing, then it probably highlighted it a lot more, probably. But when I keep myself busy, and that's what I tried to do a lot when I was in the initial course I was in. Again, it wasn't really noticeable, but when I'm probably twiddling my thumbs a bit more than I'd like to care to notice, then that's when things got a little bit difficult. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one to try and sort of measure up. And I say it can happen at any time, but I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic. I try to give myself some weekly activities and things like that, even when I have been twiddling my thumbs, to try and sort of say, okay, if I can get through this, then it's not going to be as heavy. It's not going to be as if something completely bolts me down.
So, congratulations on getting your job.
Thank you.
You start, I think, on Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
So, what do you think the future holds for Fred?
Well, at the moment it's short term, just make the most of this job, really. Try and throw myself in at the deep end as much as I can. Show that I'm willing, show that I'm, willing to do something a bit different with things. Be a bit more proactive. And it might lead to something more permanent. Because it's only an 8-month internship. The future's still very unsettled. With the pandemic and things like that, we just don't know what jobs are going to be like in the future. Whether people are going to be working more from home, working back in offices again, things like that. I mean, I'm looking forward to having that structure of commuting into Derby to do this job, and having a routine of saying, okay, I'm working 9 to 5. And all those sort of things, and being part of a team and all that sort of thing, actually tangibly, rather than having to just take orders from emails and things like that, and all those sort of things, or having to be on a Teams call and negotiate with people, which over time I got more confident with, because pre-pandemic I would not have wanted to do voice calls at all, or I would have not wanted to do video conferencing. It would have just alienated me at all. But over time I got more confident and taking gumption of these sort of things a lot more. I'm just grateful that my political activism has helped in that regard and gave me a bit more confidence of being involved in those sort of things, as well as trying to do these things academically as well. Because without those two pillars, I probably would have still been very insular. I still have been not sure where I was going, really. But come next summer, I'd like to think I'd be in a more permanent role, whether that's with the employment I'm going to be pursuing for the next few months or somewhere else. I just want to take it as it comes, really. I mean, I think one thing I have taken from the pandemic for myself is not be as structured in ambitions, be a bit more serendipitous, be a bit, a bit more courageous in saying, well, today's a new day, take on the new adventure, whatever it swings, rather than say, okay, Tuesdays I have to do this, Wednesdays I have to do this. My old job, there was a bit of a formality with it. Every week I would do the same tasks every Friday. I just knew it almost by the back of my hand. And I'm just looking forward to just making new changes in my life and taking a new angle, really.
Cool. So, I'm going to ask a few fun questions.
Yep.
Superpower. What would be your superpower?
Superpower, I'd probably say probably being able to transport myself from place A to B quite quickly.
Yeah, I think with the current traffic, I think we'd all quite like that. So, are you Marvel or DC?
Closer to Marvel.
Closer to Marvel. Okay. Favourite Marvel character?
Probably Iron Man.
Iron Man, yeah. I watched Iron Man yesterday, actually. On my day, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to have a day of watching a bit of Marvel. So, no, absolutely, Iron Man's up there. Favourite colour?
Green.
Green? Oh, green. Is that because of your political side or environmental friendly?
Sort of, but I mean, I just find green environments a lot more calming and relaxing. I think it's always, I just feel a lot more relaxed in green. I know some people see it with jealousy and all those sort of antics, but for me, it's a calming colour. And I mean, at the moment, my bedroom walls aren't the colour I want it to be, because we moved into the property that my parents and I have lived in November 2018.
Right.
My room being the last one to be done, because we just didn't know what my future was going to be holding.
Sure, okay.
So at the moment they're orange, but I'm hoping to turn them green in the near future.
Excellent. And if you could ask one question of yourself on an interview, what do you think that question would be? I have stolen this from Paul McKenna as a question, but I think it's quite a good one. What would the one question be that you would ask yourself if you could interview yourself?
I suppose I would ask myself, do you have any regrets, really?
All right, and do you?
No, I don't think I do. I mean, I'm grateful that life's given me the opportunities it has, and being able to make the most of everything. I think realistically, a lot of people sort of think, well, you must have gone through some regrets by changing courses and all those sort of things, and finding that wasn't the right thing for you. But actually, I think it worked out for the best. It's given me courage to say, okay, it didn't work out, it didn't pan out, but I still made the friendships, I still made that connection with people, I still managed to know where my boundaries are, that sort of thing, and I think that's important.
Cool. Well, Fred, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed a good conversation, and good luck with your future, and good luck with the job starting Monday.
Thank you very much.